The Montana wind carried the scent of pine and regret through the valley that morning. Robert Callahan stood on the porch of the ranch house, coffee growing cold in his weathered hands, staring at the envelope that had arrived an hour before. The return address read Seattle, Washington, a city he had never visited, a place where his son had built a life Dutch knew nothing about. Inside the envelope, a single sheet of paper. Not from Michael. Never from Michael. The letterhead belonged to Swedish Medical Center. The words blurred together at first, his eyes refusing to focus on what his heart already understood. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe less. Patient has declined contact information release, but we thought you should know. Dutch set the coffee cup down on the railing, watched it teeter for a moment before falling to the wooden planks below. The ceramic shattered into a dozen pieces, brown liquid spreading across the boards his grandfather had laid in 1932. He did not move to clean it. The wind would dry it. The wind dried everything out here eventually. 68 years old, and the math was simple. 15 years since Michael had driven away from this ranch, his final words still echoing in Dutch's memory like artillery fire. You chose your pride over me, over Jennifer, over any chance we had at being a family. I hope it keeps you warm at night, Dad. It had not kept him warm. Nothing had not since Sarah died 3 years ago. The house was too big, too quiet, filled with ghosts of better days. Sarah's reading chair by the window. Michael's room untouched since he was 17, still decorated with rodeo posters and participation ribbons. The dinner table where they had once laughed, where Dutch had once said things he could never take back. He walked inside, leaving the broken cup where it fell. The kitchen still smelled faintly of Sarah's lavender soap, though he knew that was impossible. Memory playing tricks. The brain filling empty spaces with what used to be. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like the state of Montana, was the last photograph of the three of them together. Michael's high school graduation. Sarah between them, one arm around each man, her smile bright enough to light the whole valley. Dutch's face in the photo looked proud, rigid, a man who believed he knew how the world should work. The phone on the wall rang. Dutch stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Mr. Callahan, this is Claire Patterson. I'm a hospice nurse at Swedish Medical Center. Her voice was young, careful, the kind of voice that had delivered bad news before. I probably shouldn't be calling, she continued, but your son talks in his sleep sometimes. He says your name. Dutch's throat tightened. He leaned against the counter, suddenly aware of how old his body felt. The knee that never healed right from Vietnam. The shoulder that ached when the weather changed. The heart that had stopped working properly the day Michael left. He say anything else? A pause on the other end. The sound of a door closing. Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. He says he's sorry, that he should have brought her to meet you. That maybe if he had just tried harder, you would have understood. Dutch closed his eyes. The kitchen spun slightly. Is he in pain? We're managing it. But Mr. Callahan, he doesn't have much time. And he's alone. His ex-wife visits, sometimes brings their daughter. But he's alone when the nights get bad, when the fear sets in. He won't see me. No, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try. After she hung up, Dutch stood in the kitchen for an hour. The sun moved across the floor in its familiar pattern. The same light that had fallen across this room for 4 generations. Callahan light, his father used to call it. Light that belonged to men who worked the land, who kept their word, who built something lasting. But what had he built? A ranch about to be foreclosed. A marriage ended by death. A son dying among strangers in a city 1,000 miles away. The letter from First National Bank sat on the kitchen table unopened. He knew what it said. 60 days to pay or the property goes to auction. The drought had lasted 3 years. The cattle prices had never recovered. And Dutch was too old, too tired, too alone to fight anymore. Sarah's voice came to him, then clear, as if she stood beside him. The last conversation they had 2 days before the stroke took her. She had been in the garden, hands deep in soil, trying to coax life from the hard Montana earth. Promise me something, Dutch. Anything. Find him. Find our boy. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't let pride be the last thing you have left. He had promised, and then he had done nothing. Told himself Michael was happy in saddle. Told himself some wounds ran too deep. Told himself all the lies men tell when they are too afraid to face the truth. Dutch walked to the bedroom, pulled the old duffel bag from the closet, the same bag he had carried in Vietnam, faded green canvas stained with mud and memory. He began to pack. Not much. A few shirts, his good jeans, the photograph from the refrigerator carefully folded into his wallet. In the back of the closet behind Sarah's dresses that he could not bring himself to give away, he found the box. Inside every letter Michael had sent during his first year away at college. For Jennifer, before the arguments, before everything broke. Dutch opened one at random, his son's handwriting young and eager. Dad, you would love it here. The mountains remind me of home. I'm thinking about what you said about building something that lasts. Maybe I could come back after graduation, help you with the ranch. We could make it work together. Dutch folded the letter, placed it back in the box. That boy was gone. That version of Michael had died the day Dutch had looked at Jennifer, a beautiful black woman with kind eyes and an infectious laugh, and said, "This isn't what our family does." He finished packing as the sun set over the valley. Tomorrow he would drive to town, sign whatever papers needed signing. The ranch would go to the bank. The land his great-grandfather had homesteaded would belong to strangers. But land could be replaced. Sons could not. That night, Dutch sat on the porch in the darkness, listening to the coyotes sing in the hills. The stars overhead were the same stars he had shown Michael as a boy, the same stars he had navigated by in the jungles of Southeast Asia, the same stars that would shine long after he was gone. "I'm coming, Michael," he said to the wind. "I don't know if you'll let me in. I don't know if sorry is enough, but I made your mother a promise, and I've broken enough promises to last a lifetime." The wind offered no answer. It never did. But for the first time in 3 years, Dutch felt something other than emptiness. It was not hope, not quite, but it was movement, direction, a purpose beyond waiting to die alone in a house full of ghosts. He went inside, set the alarm for 4 in the morning. The drive to Seattle would take 16 hours if he pushed it, longer if he stopped. But he would not stop. Not this time. Not when every day mattered. Not when his son was dying in a city of strangers, saying Dutch's name in his sleep. In the bedroom, he lay down on Sarah's side of the bed, something he had not done since she passed. Her pillow still smelled faintly of her shampoo. He closed his eyes and imagined her beside him, her hand in his, her voice telling him what he already knew. "It's not too late, Dutch. It's never too late to do the right thing." He slept fitfully, dreaming of Vietnam, of fire and rain and the faces of boys who never made it home, of carrying wounded friends through the jungle, refusing to leave them behind, of the promise every soldier makes, spoken or not: we bring each other home. He had left his son behind, but maybe, just maybe, there was still time to bring him home. The truck broke down outside of Spokane, steam rising from the hood, the temperature gauge buried in the red. Dutch coasted to the shoulder of Interstate 90, watched the semis blur past in the rain. 200 miles from Seattle, so close the possibility felt like a weight on his chest. The mechanic in Spokane was a kid, maybe 25, with tattoos up both arms and a nose ring. He looked at the engine, looked at Dutch, shook his head. "Radiator shot. Coolant system's compromised. I can fix it, but we're talking 3 days, maybe 4. Parts have to come from Seattle." Dutch leaned against the truck, felt the rain soak through his jacket. 4 days. How much time did Michael have? How many days could Dutch afford to lose? How much to fix it? 1,200, maybe more. Dutch did the math in his head. The ranch money would not come through for weeks if it came through at all. The bank account had $400. His credit cards were maxed. He had the truck, his duffel bag, and nothing else. What about selling it? What's it worth as is us? The kid raised an eyebrow. "You serious? This truck's a classic, man. 76 F-150. My dad had one just like it. With a new radiator, some body work, this thing's worth 8 grand easy." "What about right now, as is?" The kid walked around the truck, kicked the tires, peered in the bed. "I could give you 2,000, cash." Dutch thought about Sarah, how she had loved this truck, how they had driven it to the hospital the day Michael was born, how she had insisted on keeping it even when the transmissions started slipping, even when the rust began eating through the wheel wells. "This truck is family," she had said. "You don't give up on family." "I'll take it," Dutch said. An hour later, he stood at the Greyhound station with $2,000 in his wallet and a bus ticket to Seattle. The next departure was in 40 minutes. He bought a coffee from the vending machine, sat on a plastic chair bolted to the floor, watched people come and go. Across from him, a young woman held a baby, rocking it gently, singing something soft. The baby's hand wrapped around her finger, holding on like it was the only solid thing in the world. Dutch remembered Michael at that age. Remembered the weight of him, impossibly small, impossibly perfect. Remembered thinking he would do anything, be anything to keep this child safe. And yet, the bus was half empty. Dutch took a seat near the back, watched the landscape blur past, mountains giving way to forests, forests giving way to sprawl. Spokane to Seattle. The distance measured not just in miles, but in all the years he had wasted, all the phone calls he had not made, all the birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays when he could have said, "I was wrong. I'm sorry, please come home." He dozed fitfully, the bus rocking like a ship on a gentle sea. In his dreams, he was back in Vietnam, the heat oppressive, the jungle alive with sounds that might be birds or might be death. He was carrying someone, but he could not see their face. Just the weight of them, the trust they placed in him to get them out alive. When he woke, it was dark. The bus had stopped at a rest area outside Seattle. Dutch stepped off, stretched his legs, bought another coffee he did not want. His reflection in the bathroom mirror looked older than he felt. Gray stubble eyes, red from too little sleep, skin weathered from a lifetime under the Montana sun. He splashed water on his face, tried to imagine what he would say to Michael. What words could possibly bridge 15 years of silence? What apology could erase the look on Jennifer's face when Dutch had told Michael in front of her that he was making a mistake, that the Callahan name meant something, that tradition mattered? The shame felt fresh even now. He had been raised in a different time, he told himself. Montana in the 50s and 60s, a place where people looked the same, talked the same, believed the same things. But that was an excuse, not a reason. He had known better. Sarah had taught him better, and still he had chosen fear over love. The bus pulled into Seattle just before midnight. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows, turning the city lights into watery smears. Dutch stepped off into the wet air duffel bag over his shoulder and stood for a moment overwhelmed by the sheer size of it all. Buildings rising into the darkness, cars and people and noise. So different from the valley, from the silence he had known all his life. He found a motel 6 blocks from the bus station, $40 a night paid in cash. The room smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. The bed sagged in the middle. The heater rattled but produced no heat. Dutch lay down fully clothed, stared at the water stains on the ceiling, and wondered what the hell he was doing. His phone, an old flip model Sarah had bought him years ago, had 2 messages, both from the bank. He deleted them without listening. Tomorrow he would go to the hospital. Tomorrow he would face whatever needed facing. But sleep would not come. He rose, walked to the window, looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Michael was lying in a hospital bed, body failing, time running out. And Dutch was here 6 blocks away, separated not by distance, but by everything that had been said and everything that had not. At 3 in the morning, he gave up on sleep. He showered in the cramped bathroom, shaved with hands that trembled, slightly put on his cleanest shirt. In the mirror, he looked like what he was, an old man scared and alone trying to fix something that might be beyond fixing. The walk to Swedish Medical Center took 20 minutes. The rain had eased to a drizzle. The streets were empty except for a few homeless people huddled in doorways. Dutch thought about stopping offering money, but what little he had needed to last, needed to mean something. The hospital rose before him, all glass and steel lights blazing even at this hour. He stood outside for a long time, gathering courage. Through the windows, he could see nurses moving through corridors, doctors consulting clipboards, the machinery of saving lives turning endlessly. Finally, he pushed through the doors. The lobby was too bright, too clean, too different from anything in his world. A security guard looked up from his desk. "Help you. I'm here to see Michael Callahan." The guard typed on his computer. "Room 412, but visiting hours don't start until 8. Dutch checked his watch. 4:30 in the morning. 3.5 hours. He could wait. He had waited 15 years. What were a few more hours? He found the cafeteria, bought more coffee, sat at a table by the window, watching the city wake up. Delivery trucks rumbled past. Commuters began trickling in. The sky lightened from black to gray to a pale, watery blue. At 7:45, he took the elevator to the 4th floor. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and something else, something sweet and rotten that made his stomach turn. Death, he realized. This was what death smelled like. Room 412 was at the end of the hall. The door was closed. Dutch stood outside, hand raised to knock, frozen. On the other side of this door was his son, a man he had not seen in 15 years, a stranger who had once been everything. Before he could knock, the door opened. A woman emerged, maybe 40, with tired eyes and scrubs decorated with cartoon hearts. Claire, he realized. The nurse who had called. She stopped when she saw him. Recognition flickered across her face. Mr. Callahan. Is he awake? Claire glanced back at the room, then pulled the door mostly closed. He is, but he's having a rough morning. The pain medication makes him confused sometimes, and he still doesn't want visitors. I'm not a visitor. I'm his father. I know who you are, but he's been very clear. No contact. Dutch looked past her through the gap in the door. He could see a bed machines, a figure lying still beneath white sheets. So close, after all this distance, all this time his son was 20 feet away. Can I just look at him? I won't go in. I won't say anything. I just need to see him. Claire hesitated, then stepped aside. Dutch moved to the doorway, careful not to cross the threshold. Michael lay in the bed, face turned toward the window. He had always been big, solid built like Dutch's father. But the man in the bed was skeletal skin, stretched over bone IV lines, running from arms that looked too thin to be real. His hair, once thick and dark, had fallen out in patches. His breathing was shallow, labored. Dutch's hand gripped the door frame to keep himself upright. This was his son, his boy. The child he had taught to ride a horse, to throw a baseball, to stand up straight and look a man in the eye. And Dutch had done this to him. Not the cancer, but the loneliness, the isolation. The years of dying slowly in a city of strangers because his own father could not see past the color of someone's skin. Michael's eyes opened. For a moment they were unfocused, distant. Then they landed on Dutch standing in the doorway. Recognition came slowly like sunrise, and with it something else. Pain, anger, and beneath it all something that might have been hope. No, Michael said, his voice barely above a whisper. No, you don't get to be here. Michael, I just want to talk. Get out. Stronger now. Michael tried to sit up, grimaced, fell back against the pillows. Get the hell out. Claire moved between them. Mr. Callahan, you need to go. You're upsetting him. I came from Montana. I sold everything. Please, just 5 minutes. I don't care if you walked from the moon, Michael said. You made your choice 15 years ago. Live with it. Dutch stepped back from the door. Claire pulling it shut, but not before Dutch saw his son turn his face to the wall, shoulders shaking with sobs or rage or both. In the corridor, Dutch stood with his back against the wall, sliding down until he sat on the floor. Around him, the hospital continued its work. Nurses passed, families arrived, life and death flowing past like a river that had no time for one old man's regrets. Claire sat down beside him. For a long time, neither spoke. He talks about you, she finally said, more than you'd think. He tells stories about growing up on the ranch, about learning to rope cattle, about his mother. He's not as angry as he pretends. He has every right to be. Maybe, but anger and cancer make terrible roommates. They're eating him up from the inside. Dutch pulled the photograph from his wallet. Michael's graduation, Sarah smiling between them. He held it out to Claire. Could you give him this? Tell him I'll be in Seattle. Tell him I'm not going anywhere, and tell him I'm sorry for all of it. Claire took the photo, studied it. He looks happy here. We all were once. Dutch pushed himself to his feet, every joint protesting. 68 years old felt like 108. He walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. Behind him, Claire called out, Mr. Callahan, there's a daughter. Lily, she's 14. She visits after school most days. The elevator doors opened. Dutch stepped inside, pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, he saw Claire still standing in the corridor, holding the photograph, watching him descend. On the street, the rain had started again. Dutch walked without direction, letting the city swallow him. He passed coffee shops and bookstores and office buildings. He passed people rushing to wherever people rush, all of them with purposes and destinations and lives that made sense. He found himself in a park. Pike Place, someone had called it. Tourists millowed about, taking photos, buying flowers. An old man played guitar for change, his case open at his feet. Dutch dropped $1 in, kept walking. By the time he made it back to the motel, his clothes were soaked through. He changed into dry things, lay on the bed, stared at the ceiling. The afternoon stretched ahead, empty and purposeless. Tomorrow would come, and the day after, and the day after that, and Dutch would be here waiting, hoping for a chance that might never come. His phone rang, a number he did not recognize. "Mr. Callahan, this is Jennifer," Michael's ex-wife, the woman Dutch had judged without knowing, the woman who had loved his son when Dutch would not. "I heard you were at the hospital," she continued. "Claire told me. I think we should talk." They met at a diner 3 blocks from the motel. Jennifer was smaller than Dutch remembered, but her eyes held the same strength, the same refusal to be diminished. She ordered coffee, waited until the waitress left, then looked at Dutch with an expression he could not quite read. "Why are you here? He's my son. He's been your son for 42 years. You decided you didn't want him 15 years ago." The words hit like fists. Dutch absorbed them, knowing he deserved worse. "You're right. I was wrong about everything. I came to tell him that." Jennifer stirred her coffee, though she had added nothing to it. "Do you know why Michael and I divorced?" Dutch shook his head. "Because he could never forgive himself for choosing me over you. He thought if he just gave it time, you'd come around, that you'd see we were happy, and that would be enough. But you never called, never wrote, and eventually that silence broke him. He started drinking, started disappearing for days, started looking at me like I was the reason his father abandoned him. I never abandoned him. I just needed time to what? To stop being a bigot, to realize your son's happiness mattered more than your pride." Jennifer's voice was rising. People at other tables were staring. She lowered it, but the intensity remained. "He loved you, Mr. Callahan. Even after everything, he loved you. And you let him suffer for it." Dutch felt the truth of it settle in his chest. "I know." Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're here to make yourself feel better, to get forgiveness so you can die with a clean conscience. But Michael's the one dying. Michael's the one who needed you, and you're 15 years too late." She stood, threw money on the table for her untouched coffee. "Lily will be at the hospital tomorrow at 4. She deserves to meet her grandfather, even if he doesn't deserve to meet her." Then she was gone, leaving Dutch alone with his coffee and his shame. That night, Dutch walked the streets of Seattle until his feet ached. He found a bar, nearly went in, then kept walking. He found a church, considered going in to pray, then decided God probably had better things to do than listen to an old man's excuses. He ended up back at the hospital, standing outside in the rain, looking up at the 4th floor. One of those windows was Michael's. Behind it, his son lay dying, angry and alone, carrying wounds Dutch had inflicted. Dutch pulled out his phone, typed a message to Michael's room phone. He did not know if Michael would see it, did not know if it would matter, but he wrote it anyway. "I sold the ranch, I sold the truck. I came here because your mother made me promise to find you. But that's not why I'm staying. I'm staying because I was wrong, because I let fear make me cruel, because you deserve better than I gave you. I don't expect forgiveness, I don't expect anything, but I'm here, and I'll be here as long as you'll let me. Your father." He sent the message, then walked back to the motel through streets that no longer felt quite so foreign. The girl appeared in the hospital cafeteria 3 days later. Dutch had taken to spending his afternoons there, drinking coffee, watching the elevators, hoping for a glimpse of Michael being wheeled somewhere, anywhere. He had not seen his son since that first morning. The message he had sent had gone unanswered. She was mixed race, with Michael's dark hair and Jennifer's delicate features. She carried a backpack covered in pins and patches, band names Dutch did not recognize, slogans about climate change and equality. She bought a muffin and orange juice, sat 2 tables away, pulled out a sketchbook. Dutch watched her draw. Quick, confident strokes. She was good. Really good. The sketch took shape. A portrait of someone. Michael, Dutch realized. But not Michael as he was now. Michael, younger, healthier, smiling. After 15 minutes, she looked up, caught Dutch staring. "Can I help you?" "You're Lily." She closed the sketchbook. "How do you know my name?" "I'm Dutch. I'm your grandfather." The words hung in the air between them. Lily's expression cycled through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been anger. "Mom said you might be here. Said you sold your farm to come see Dad. Ranch. But yes. Why now? Why not 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Dutch had no good answer. Because I was scared. Because I was wrong. Because I'm a foolish old man who didn't damn well understand what mattered until it was almost too late. Lily studied him, her eyes old beyond her years. Dad doesn't talk about you much, but when he does, he always gets this look, like he's remembering something that hurts. I know, Tay. Are you here to hurt him more? The question cut deep. No, I'm here to try to fix what I broke, if that's even possible. Lily opened her sketchbook again, flipped to a blank page. She began to draw, not looking at Dutch now, her attention focused on the paper. Tell me about the ranch. So Dutch did. He told her about the valley, about the mountains that turned purple at sunset, about the smell of pine and sage after a rain, about the horses and cattle, about the house his great-grandfather had built with his own hands, log by log. He told her about Sarah, about how they had met at a county fair, how she had beaten him at the shooting gallery, how he had fallen in love right there watching her laugh at his bruised ego, about how she had made the ranch a home planting gardens that defied the harsh climate, filling the house with music and light. He told her about Michael as a boy, about teaching him to ride to rope to fix a fence, about the time Michael found an injured owl and nursed it back to health, keeping it in his room for 3 months, feeding it scraps of meat, talking to it like a friend. As he talked, Lily drew, her pencil moving across the page, creating something Dutch could not see from his angle. He never told me any of this, she said quietly. About the owl, about Grandma, about the ranch. Maybe it hurt too much to remember. Or maybe he wanted to protect me from you. The honesty was brutal and fair. Dutch nodded. Maybe so. Lily finished her sketch, turned the pad around. She had drawn the ranch. Not from description, but from imagination. And somehow, impossibly, she had captured it. The house, the mountains, the wide Montana sky. In the foreground, 3 figures. A man, a woman, a boy. A family. Is this what it looked like? She asked. Close enough. She tore the page out, handed it to him. Keep it. Maybe show it to Dad. Remind him of what he came from. Thank you. Lily stood and shouldered her backpack. I visit him every day after school. Sometimes he's awake, sometimes not. If you want to try again, maybe come when he's sleeping. You can't make things worse if you're just sitting there. She left and Dutch sat holding the drawing, this gift from a granddaughter he had just met. A girl who had every reason to hate him and yet had offered him kindness. He wondered what Jennifer had told her, what Michael had said during those late-night conversations when the pain medication loosened his tongue. That evening, Dutch followed Lily's advice. He went to the 4th floor at 8 when visiting hours were ending. Claire was at the nurse's station, finishing paperwork. He's asleep, she said. Has been for a few hours. The new medication knocks him out. Can I sit with him? I won't wake him. I just want to be there. Claire considered, then nodded. 20 minutes, then I have to ask you to leave. Room 412 was dark except for the glow of monitors. The machines beeped steadily, tracking heartbeat and oxygen and all the numbers that measured a life. Michael lay on his side, breathing shallow and irregular. In sleep, his face relaxed, and Dutch could see the boy he had been, the son he had lost. Dutch sat in the chair by the window, careful not to make noise. He pulled out Lily's drawing, studied it in the dim light. She had captured something true, not just the ranch, but the feeling of it, the sense of belonging, of roots running deep. She's talented, Dutch said quietly, not sure if he was talking to Michael or to himself or to the empty air. Your daughter, she has your mother's eye for beauty. Sarah always saw the world differently than I did, saw possibility where I saw only what was. He folded the drawing, placed it on the bedside table where Michael would see it when he woke. I brought you something else too. From his jacket pocket, Dutch pulled out a small wooden box. He had carved it himself years ago before his hands started shaking with age. It was simple work, nothing fancy, but the wood was smooth and the joints were tight. Inside the box were his dog tags from Vietnam, his Purple Heart, and a letter written on motel stationery, his handwriting shaky but legible. He did not read it aloud, did not need to. He knew every word, an accounting of failures, an apology that could never be adequate, a confession of love that had always been there buried beneath pride and fear. He placed the box beside the drawing, stood, moved to the door. At the threshold, he paused, looked back at his son. I don't know if you can hear me. Don't know if you'd care if you could. But I need you to know something. Being your father was the greatest honor of my life, and failing you was the greatest shame. I can't fix the past, can't give back the years we lost. But I can be here now. I can sit with you in the dark. And maybe if there's any mercy in this world, you'll let me hold your hand when the time comes. Because you shouldn't be alone. Nobody should be alone at the end. He left before emotion could choke off his words. In the corridor, Claire was waiting. He heard you, she said. He's asleep. The monitors, his heart rate changed when you talked. He heard you. Dutch absorbed this, not sure if it made things better or worse. Will you make sure he gets the box, the drawing? I will. Dutch rode the elevator down, walked out into a Seattle night that had grown familiar. He knew these streets now, knew where the homeless congregated, knew which coffee shops opened early, knew the best place to sit and watch the city wake. He had found work at a lumberyard, cash under the table, loading trucks and sweeping floors. It was hard work for a man his age, but it kept him busy, kept him from thinking too much. The money was enough for the motel, for food, for the bus fare to the hospital. His days fell into a rhythm. Work in the morning, hospital in the afternoon, sitting in the cafeteria or the waiting room, sometimes catching a glimpse of Michael through the window of his room. Evening walks through the city. Night alone in the motel, listening to the sounds of other people's lives through thin walls. He met Jennifer, twice more conversations that were less hostile but no less honest. She told him about Michael's life in Seattle, about the software company he had built from nothing, about his love for hiking, for music, for cooking elaborate meals, about the daughter he adored, the marriage that had failed, the loneliness that had defined his last years. He dated a few times after we split, Jennifer said over coffee one gray afternoon, but it never went anywhere. He said he didn't want to inflict himself on anyone, that he was too broken. That's my fault. It's not all your fault. We all made choices, but yes, you carry some of it. 1 week became two. Two became a month. Dutch's money ran low. He picked up more hours at the lumberyard, his body protesting every morning when he tried to rise. The motel room grew more depressing, the walls closing in. But he stayed, because he had made a promise, because leaving now would be just another abandonment, because somewhere in that hospital, his son was dying and Dutch would be damned if he would let Michael face it alone. On a Wednesday afternoon, rain hammering against the cafeteria windows, Lily appeared with her backpack and her sketchbook. She sat across from Dutch, pulled out her phone. Dad wants to see you. Dutch's heart stuttered. What? He found the box. Read your letter. He's been asking about you for 2 days. Claire kept telling him you were here, that you came every day. He wants to see you. Dutch stood, legs unsteady. Now. They rode the elevator in silence. Dutch's hands were shaking. He shoved them in his pockets, tried to breathe, normally failed. The corridor stretched ahead longer than he remembered. Room 412, at the end door, open light spilling out. Michael was awake, propped up on pillows, looking smaller than ever. But his eyes were clear, alert. He watched Dutch approach, expression unreadable. Lily touched Dutch's arm. I'll give you privacy. Then it was just the two of them, father and son. 15 years of silence filling the space between the bed and the doorway. You sold the ranch, Michael said finally. Yes. The truck too. Yes. Why? Dutch moved into the room, stayed near the wall, giving Michael space. Because they were just things. And you're my son. Michael's jaw tightened. Tears gathered in his eyes but did not fall. You said I was a disappointment. You said I was throwing away the family name. You said I was making the biggest mistake of my life. I know, and I was wrong. About all of it. You never called, not once in 15 years. I waited. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Tuesday and Thursday and ordinary day. I waited for you to call and tell me you were sorry, that you understood, but you never did. Dutch moved closer, stopped at the foot of the bed. His own tears were flowing now, and he made no attempt to hide them. I was scared. I'd grown up in a world where everyone looked the same, believed the same things. And when you brought Jennifer home, I saw my world changing, saw it becoming something I didn't understand. So I fought against it, against you, against her, against change itself. And in the process, I lost the most important thing I had. You hurt her. You hurt me. You made us feel like our love was wrong, like we were wrong for being together. I know, and I'm sorry it's not enough. Nothing I say can be enough, but I'm sorry. Michael closed his eyes, leaned back against the pillows. His breathing was labored. The machines beeped faster. Claire appeared in the doorway, concern on her face, but Michael waved her away. Mom's gone, he said quietly. I know. Jennifer told me. I wanted to come to the funeral, but I thought you wouldn't want me there. She would have wanted you there. She never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping we'd find our way back to each other. I know. I read your letter. 20 times I've read it. And you want to know the worst part? I believe you. I believe you're sorry. I believe you've changed. But I'm so angry, Dad. I'm so goddamn angry, and I don't know how to let it go. Dutch moved to the chair beside the bed, sat down heavily. Then be angry. You've earned it. Yell at me if you want. Tell me everything I did wrong. I'll sit here and take it. Because I deserve it, and because I'm not going anywhere. Michael opened his eyes, looked at his father, really looked at him, saw the gray hair, the weathered skin, the way Dutch's hands trembled, saw the old man who had crossed 1,000 miles and given up everything just to sit in this room. You look old, Michael said. I am old, too old to be as stupid as I've been. Something like a smile ghosted across Michael's face. Remember teaching me to ride? I was 5, maybe 6. That old mare Sage. You put me up in the saddle and I started crying, said I was scared. And you told me fear was just excitement without the smile. And you remembered that. I remembered everything, every word you said, every lesson you taught. You were my hero, Dad, right up until the moment you weren't. The words cut deep, but Dutch nodded. I don't expect to be your hero again. I just want to be here. However long you have left. I want to be your father if you'll let me. Michael reached out his hand, pale and thin, shaking with effort. Dutch took it, felt how fragile it was, how the bones seemed ready to break. They sat like that, hand in hand, neither speaking, both crying. Outside, the rain continued. The city moved through its rhythms. And in room 4122, 2 men who had been strangers tried to remember how to be family. The next 2 weeks blurred together. Dutch moved into Michael's room, sleeping in the reclining chair, refusing to leave. They talked about everything and nothing, about the ranch, about Seattle, about the years between, about Sarah's death, about Jennifer and the divorce, about Lily and her art. Michael shared things Dutch had never known. About building his company, about the fear of failing, about the pride when it succeeded, about hiking the Cascades on summer weekends, about the peace he found in the mountains, about the hole Dutch's absence had left and the ways Michael had tried to fill it. Dutch shared things too, about Vietnam stories he had never told anyone, not even Sarah, about the fear and the brotherhood and the guilt of coming home when so many had not, about the nightmares that still came, about the way war never really ends for the men who fight it. They played chess with a board Lily brought. Michael won every game, even through the fog of medication. They watched old westerns on the TV mounted to the wall. They sat in silence when the pain grew too great for talking. Jennifer visited often, and the 3 of them found a kind of peace, not forgiveness exactly, but an understanding, a recognition that they had all been young and scared and doing the best they knew how. Lily came every day after school, sketching while the adults talked. She drew Dutch's hands, weathered and scarred. She drew Michael's face, capturing both the illness and the essence beneath. She drew the view from the window, Seattle spreading out below, alive and indifferent. One afternoon, Lily looked up from her sketchbook. Grandpa, tell me about the owl. So Dutch did with Michael, adding details, correcting and embellishing. The owl had been named Horace. Michael had found it with a broken wing, brought it home in his jacket. Sarah had helped him build a perch in his bedroom, had shown him how to feed it, how to exercise the wing as it healed. When we released it, Michael said, his voice soft with memory, it circled the ranch 3 times, like it was saying goodbye. Then it flew toward the mountains, and we never saw it again. Did it make you sad? Lily asked. A little, but mostly it made me happy, because it was free, because we'd helped it. Lily drew the owl as Michael described it. When she finished, she showed the sketch to her father. He stared at it for a long time, then smiled. That's perfect, Lil. That's exactly how I remember it. That night after Lily and Jennifer left, Michael had what the doctors called a crisis. His breathing deteriorated. His blood pressure dropped. The machines screamed their warnings. Dutch stood back as nurses and doctors flooded the room. Working with practiced efficiency, he watched them stabilize his son, watched Michael's face contort with pain, watched him struggle to breathe. When the crisis passed and the medical staff dispersed, Dutch returned to the chair. Michael's eyes found his. "I'm scared, Dad." "I know, son. I don't want to die." "I know." Michael's hand found Dutch's again. "But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I don't have to do this alone." "You're not alone. You'll never be alone again." The days grew shorter, the crises more frequent. Michael slept more than he woke. When he was awake, he was often confused, calling for Sarah, asking if the cattle had been fed, thinking he was back in Montana. Dutch played along, answering questions about a ranch that no longer existed, about a life that had been lost. Sometimes Michael would surface clarity, returning like sun through clouds. In those moments, they said the important things. "I forgive you," Michael whispered one evening, his voice so soft Dutch almost missed it. "What?" "I forgive you, for all of it. I don't want to die carrying this anger. I want to go knowing we found each other again." Dutch leaned forward, pressed his forehead against his son's. "Thank you, God, thank you. Tell Lily about the ranch, about Mom. Make sure she knows where she comes from." "I will, I promise. And Dad, I love you. I always have. Even when I hated you, I loved you." "I love you too, son, more than anything in this world." On a gray Saturday morning, 2 months after Dutch had first arrived in Seattle, Michael Callahan died. Dutch was holding his hand. Lily sat on the other side of the bed. Jennifer stood at the foot, her hand on Michael's leg. There was no drama, no final words, just breathing that grew slower and slower, then stopped. The machines flatlined. The nurses came, but there was nothing to do. Michael was gone. Dutch sat with his son's body for an hour after unwilling to let go. Finally, gently, Claire touched his shoulder. "You need to let him go now, Mr. Callahan." Dutch kissed Michael's forehead, cold now, already no longer his son. Just a shell, empty of everything that had made him who he was. In the corridor, Lily collapsed into Dutch's arms, sobbing. He held her, this granddaughter he barely knew, and let his own grief flow. Jennifer stood apart, composed, handling the details with practiced efficiency. But Dutch saw the way her hands shook when she signed the papers. The funeral was small. Michael had not wanted anything elaborate. A simple service at a chapel near the hospital. 20 people came. Colleagues from his company, friends from the hiking club, Jennifer's family, Lily's friends from school. Dutch stood at the front, looking at the closed casket, at the photograph prop beside it. Michael at 30, healthy and smiling on a mountain summit somewhere, his whole life ahead of him. When it came time for eulogies, Dutch walked to the podium. He had prepared nothing, had no idea what to say, but he pulled out the photograph Lily had drawn, the one of the ranch, and held it up. "My son grew up in Montana," he began, his voice shaking, "in a valley where the mountains touch the sky. He learned to ride before he could read. He saved an injured owl when he was 10. He built a software company from nothing. He had a daughter who inherited his mother's talent and his own kind heart. And for 15 years, I let my pride and my fear keep me from knowing him." He paused, swallowed hard. "I came to Seattle too late to save him, but I came in time to tell him I was sorry, in time to hold his hand, in time to hear him say he forgave me. And for that, I will be grateful every day I have left." He looked at Lily sitting in the front row. "Your father asked me to tell you about where you come from, about the ranch, about your grandmother. And I will. I'll tell you every story I know, because that's what family does. We carry each other's stories. We keep them alive. We pass them down." After the service, people approached Dutch with condolences. They shared memories of Michael he had never heard. The time Michael had driven 3 hours to help a colleague whose car had broken down. The way he mentored young employees. His terrible jokes and his worst karaoke singing. Dutch listened to it all, grateful for these glimpses of his son's life. Grateful that Michael had found happiness, had built a community, had mattered to people. Later at Jennifer's apartment, Dutch sat with Lily while Jennifer dealt with well-wishers in the other room. Lily was quiet, drawing in her sketchbook. "What happens now?" she asked without looking up. "What do you mean? Do you go back to Montana now that he's gone?" Dutch had been wondering the same thing. The ranch was sold. The truck was sold. Everything that had tied him to Montana was gone. But was there anything here? Did he have a place in Seattle, in this city that had never been his home? I don't know, he said honestly. What do you think I should do? Lily looked up from her drawing. I think you should stay. I think you should tell me stories about my dad and my grandma. I think you should teach me about the ranch and the mountains and all the things I should know. You want me to stay? Mom does too. She won't say it, but I can tell. And I think Dad would want it. He always said family was the most important thing. Even when our family was broken, he believed in it. Dutch felt something settle in his chest, a rightness, a sense of purpose he had not felt since leaving Montana. Then I'll stay. Over the next months, Dutch built a new life in Seattle. He moved out of the motel into a small apartment 3 blocks from Jennifer and Lily. He found steadier work at the lumberyard, taking on more responsibility, earning enough to pay his bills, and help Jennifer with expenses. He spent his evenings with Lily, teaching her to play chess, telling her stories, listening to her talk about school and friends and dreams. He helped her with her college applications, proud beyond words when she got accepted to art school with a full scholarship. He went to her art shows, stood in galleries, watching strangers admire drawings his granddaughter had made. He saw Michael in her talent, Sarah in her kindness, in something uniquely hers in the way she saw the world. He joined a veterans group, found fellowship with men who understood what it meant to carry war in your bones. He talked about Vietnam, for the first time really talked, and found that sharing the weight made it lighter. On Sundays, he and Jennifer would visit Michael's grave. Not the temporary marker, but the permanent headstone Dutch had saved for months to afford. It was simple granite with Michael's name, his dates, and beneath that, an inscription Dutch and Jennifer had chosen together. Michael Callahan, beloved son, father, friend. He built bridges where others saw divides. Dutch would stand there sometimes for hours talking to his son, updating him on Lily's progress, telling him about the city Dutch was slowly learning to love, apologizing for things that no longer needed apologizing for, but that Dutch still felt compelled to say. One Sunday, nearly a year after Michael's death, Lily came with Dutch to the cemetery. She brought her sketchbook, as always. She sat on the grass beside her father's grave and drew. When she finished, she showed Dutch. It was a portrait of the three of them. Dutch, Michael, and Lily. 3 generations. Michael stood between them, one hand on Dutch's shoulder, one hand on Lily's. He was smiling, healthy, whole. This is how I want to remember him, Lily said. Not sick, not angry, just my dad connecting us. Dutch took the drawing, felt tears come again. He had cried more in the past year than in all the years before combined. But these tears were different. Not just grief, but gratitude. For second chances. For forgiveness. For family. That night in his apartment, Dutch pulled out a box he kept in his closet. Inside were the dog tags he had given Michael. The box had been returned to him after the funeral along with a letter. Not the one Dutch had written, but a new one. Written by Michael in his final days. Dutch had read it 100 times, would read it 100 more. But tonight he read it aloud as if Michael could hear. Dad, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And you kept your promise to Mom. You found me. You stayed. You were here when I needed you most. I know you think you failed me, that you wasted 15 years. But here's what I learned in the end. It's not about how much time we have. It's about what we do with the time we're given. You gave me peace, Dad. You let me die knowing I was loved. Knowing I had a father who would cross any distance to be with me. That's not failure. That's grace. Tell Lily about the ranch, about Mom, about me when I was young. Give her the stories I never got around to sharing. And Dad, forgive yourself. I have. I did. I do. Your son, Michael. Dutch folded the letter, placed it back in the box with the dog tags and the Purple Heart. Tomorrow he would meet Jennifer and Lily for breakfast. They would plan the memorial bench they were installing at Michael's favorite hiking trail. They would talk about ordinary things and important things and everything in between. But tonight, Dutch sat in his small apartment in a city that had become home and allowed himself to feel something he had not felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of pain, not the erasure of regret, but the knowledge that he had done something right, that he had honored his promise, that when his son needed him most, he had been there. The Montana Valley was gone sold to strangers. The ranch house would be torn down or renovated beyond recognition. The land his family had worked for generations would grow crops for people who did not know the Callahan name. But Michael's grave was here. Lily was here. A new family, smaller and harder one, but family nonetheless. Dutch turned off the light, lay down, and slept without nightmares for the first time in 50 years. In the darkness, if he listened carefully, he could almost hear Sarah's